Well, hello, greetings from Vanderbilt University. Well, to be more precise and exact, greetings from my home office in Nashville, Tennessee. My name is Paul Lim, and I have been at Vanderbilt University for the last 14 years, since 2006, teaching in the Divinity School in the area of History of Christianity, as well as in the College of Arts and Science in the departments of History, Religious Studies, and Asian Studies. I have been a Christian since I was a junior at Yale, since January of 1989, and it's been a very interesting and unexpected walk toward God and Jesus Christ. I never really thought that I would become an academic, but my conversion experience as a junior in college meant that I didn't have a lot of faculty mentors who were Christians. So I think the question that I have to answer today as part of our discussion or presentation is very germane to my own life journey and my own identity. And that is, what is Jesus doing today in universities? That is a fantastic question. So thank you for putting that to me as a presenter in this summer lecture series at First Pres, Columbia, South Carolina. First of all, I so very much wish to have been there in person, fellowshipping with you and sharing this message with you, and getting to know you and getting to know your context as well, because I do know that Columbia is the city where the University of South Carolina is located. So, I would love to have interacted with some of the students and faculty and staff, as well as other parishioners, and best of all with pastors there on staff, both the Reverend Dr. Gabriel Fleurer and also the senior minister, the Reverend Dr. Derek Thomas. So it's my regret that I couldn't be there in person. Also, one last shout out before I get into the meaty part of the presentation to Dave Hendricks, who used to be at Vanderbilt University working with Crew and now faithfully serving the students at First Pres Columbia. So thank you for the invitation. Although I am having to be here at home giving this talk via video link or upload, I am glad and I'm honored to be talking to you and engaging with you on this topic of what is Jesus doing today in universities. So answers to that particular question will depend on to whom this question is directed, and also what type of university or college it may be as well. So for example, if the question, what is Jesus doing today in universities, was asked and put to students and faculty and staff at, let's say, Stanford University, as well as, let's say, Biola University, both universities in the state of California, the answer will be probably substantially different. Or similarly put, students from Harvard University, as opposed to students at Wheaton College, Illinois, will be different as well. So we'll explore that a little bit further as we go on in my presentation. And also, I was duly warned to present this talk and present this talk not for experts, therefore trying to keep professional jargons to bare minimum, and I'll try to do that because I've been told that this lecture series gets a number of different people in terms of demographic, in terms of diversity of audience, whether educational level, socioeconomic level, or just, men and women and everything in between. So this will be an inclusive presentation, being aware of the fact that there will be different demographics, both in person as well as online, who will be interfacing with this presentation about what is Jesus doing in universities. So a little bit more about myself before we get into the central part of the discussion, and that is, I have been teaching for the last 20 years. In 1999 through 2001, I was a graduate student doing a good bit of undergraduate teaching at the University of Cambridge, where I did my PhD in England. And from 2001 to 2006, I've taught at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary in Boston, in South Hamilton to be more exact, in Massachusetts. And from 2006 until present day, I've been teaching at Vanderbilt University. All of that as a historian of post-Reformation England. I did my dissertation or thesis on Richard Baxter, a Puritan minister, his ecclesiology. And that was finished in 2001. A book came out in 2004, and I co-edited with a good friend, John Coffey, the Cambridge Companion to Puritanism in 2008. And then in 2012, I published with Oxford University Press a book called Mystery Unveiled, the Crisis of the Trinity in Early Modern England. I've always been fascinated by why and how Christians disagreed about stuff and how they sought to resolve their differences. And so that has been my sort of an ongoing topic of discussion, scholarly research, as well as personal journey as well. So as a historian, what I will do today is talk about in three different parts: past, present, and future. How was Jesus involved? What was Jesus doing yesterday or yesterdays in universities regarding the past? And what is Jesus doing today in universities regarding the present? And what will Jesus be doing tomorrow in universities regarding the future dimension? We'll spend the least bit of time talking about the past, and secondly about the future, and the bulk of our conversation will be focused on the present. So the past dimension will talk about why universities were founded, and to be more precise, what was the nature of the relationship between the bride of Christ, i.e. the church, and the university. And the present day context will be about why in late modern context, Christians should still care about the university and what is going on. To what extent that is desirable and possible will be a very, very important question. I will not have all the time nor the expertise, to be quite frank, to answer that comprehensively, but I will certainly give it a go as a practitioner of university education for the last 2 decades or so. And the future dimensionality is about, where should I send my child to college? Should I send her or him to a Christian college or secular university? Which region of the country? Should I stay in the South, or should I send her or him to the Northeast or the West Coast? These are some very important questions. I'm not serving in the capacity of a college counselor, but I have my own personal perspectives and perhaps even biases regarding that. So on to the past then, shall we? So regarding the past, to put it very kind of bluntly and succinctly, you can say this about medieval universities and their foundings. Human learning was carried out with the divine presence and purpose in view. So let me say that again. Human learning in universities was carried out with the divine presence and purposes in view. Meaning this, that human and humane learning was not done in contradistinction to, or worse yet, contradiction to, or collusion against divine presence and purposes. Like it or not, the church had a great deal to do with universities. They founded universities, they financially supported the universities, they also safeguarded the truth claims within the universities, and sometimes they came into collision course. But for the most part, medieval universities had a lot to do with providing the sort of educated clergy persons for the medieval church. So there was a lot more symbiotic relationship between the two, we might say. So for example, the first 5 universities in the known world were University of Bologna in Italy, founded in 1088, and further down the road, about 8 years down the road, and less than a decade later, in England, University of Oxford was founded in 1096. And in Spain, the University of Salamanca was given the royal charter in 1134. And also in the same century, in 1160, what will be known later on as the University of Paris was founded as well. And my own alma mater, University of Cambridge, was founded in 1209, as several scholars came from Oxford to found a different university. So all these 5 universities and many, many more beyond had this in common. They were founded in order to foster further human learning, but they were never designed to contradict or deny the presence of divine being and divine purpose and divine truth. So that was the past. So for example, theology and philosophy were not taught at variance against each other, nor were mathematics or astronomy taught so that one will say one thing and the other will say another matter. In fact, one of the best known physicists of the early modern period, Sir Isaac Newton, was convinced that to do proper mathematics and physics was to bring the glory of God. And he wrote a lot more about theology than he did about physics, although his views on the Trinity was a little bit problematic, as he was Arian, but nonetheless, he was really committed to the notion that all truth was God's truth, and mathematics and astronomy and physics were not designed to take us away from God. In fact, they were designed to bring us closer to God. A view that is probably not held by many mathematicians and physicists and astronomers in modern day universities. Here's a picture, I think, of that captures the sort of mentality of the period that I'm talking about very well. I don't know if you can see this picture. I'll bring it a little closer for the camera. Yes, this is a picture of a medieval Bible, 13th century Bible, that has this wonderful picture of God measuring the cosmos with a compass. Let me show that again. That is, okay, right here. Oops. There you are. Okay. Right. You can see that, right? You can see that well, I hope. Has a picture of anthropomorphized picture of God with a compass and the kind of a circular hemispheric thing that he's measuring is the universe itself. So this is a sort of a very interesting way of accommodating divine realities into a pictorial format. And that is, God is measuring the universe in that exact fashion so as to create it most perfectly and beautifully. That means God was involved with creation not only in the beginning part of it, but also in the present format as well. That God was the one who is the creator as well as a sustainer. Moreover, God was not someone who was not aware of astrophysics or astronomy or geometry or algebra or other chemistry and biology. Why do I say that? I think it is important to bear that in mind because in modern day, in modern sensibilities, we think of God as only committed to and concerned about the Bible and theology. No, that is not the case. As that 13th century manuscript Bible illustration clearly explains and depicts, God is the one who was involved in all truth endeavors and claims. But we're not in that world anymore. And that brings us to the second part of the presentation, which is about the present. So there are a number of compelling theories and books after books written to explain as to why we have left that world and what were the causes and what were the consequences, ranging from scholars such as George Marsden of Notre Dame to Mark Knoll, formerly of Wheaton and Notre Dame, to Cardinal John Henry Newman. So you got an evangelical and Presbyterian as well as Catholic writing as to why these sureties and certainties of medieval consensus was jettisoned. And it's a larger question that we will not occupy most of our time. But I want to put it to you very briefly and hopefully not untruthfully. And that is that among many theories, I think we can try to summarize it and distill it in this way. That what has happened since modernity, or you can push it back to the Reformation or Renaissance humanism, and the long-term consequences of that may be, and especially culminating with the Enlightenment project and the advent of modernity and secularity, is as follows. That there was a sort of a dethronement of divine revelation and enthronement of human reason. Let me say that again. There was a dethroning of divine revelation, and there was an enthronement of human reason as the final arbiter of competing truth claims. So let's sit on that statement for a little bit. I think that's pretty important for us to think about that. So one happened is almost as if we're on a seesaw. So on the one hand, there is a divine revelation. On the other hand, there's a human reason. And one had to go up, then the other will inexorably and inevitably go down. So when there was a divine revelation that was sort of championing, then at the same time, human reason was done in service of and for the purpose of divine revelation. But what has happened with the Enlightenment project and the dawn of modernity and the full advent of secularity, secular humanism, was that there was a dethroning of divine revelation and enthroning of human reason as the final arbiter of all competing truth claims. And that certainly is what has happened in universities. Now, that wasn't always the case, however, but that's sort of the way that it ended up being. So, for example, in 1635, a group of English Puritans settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and with the founding of Harvard University, Harvard College, its crest used to be Veritas Pro Ecclesia et Christo, which means truth for the church and for Christ, but now it is simply Veritas. It is just truth. Truth for its own sake, not for the church, not for Christ. But in the beginning, it was certainly that way. Same thing with Yale University, my own undergraduate alma mater, which had still has that crest of looks at Veritas. Truth, light and truth. Light and truth that were both contained in the Gospel of John, as Jesus claimed to be the light and the truth. But when you talk to anyone at Harvard or Yale about the truth or truth at light and truth, they will not really think it back to the Christian traditions as the founding motto of these two institutions. So most faculty and administrators of these two elite institutions will balk at that antiquated notion of truth for the service of the church and Jesus, as well as truth and light for the service of humankind. So that brings me to the present dimension, and it's important for us to think about it this way. So we are confronted with this question, what is Jesus doing today in universities? And I would say that the answer to that question, if this question was asked to a number of people in Columbia, South Carolina, or here in Nashville, Tennessee, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Palo Alto, California, or any other city where colleges do exist, would depend a lot on whether and to what extent you take seriously the person and purposes and the claims of Jesus Christ, and whether he has anything to do with our industry of knowledge production. So I think what I am saying is this: we have to take into consideration very seriously these competing and colliding worldviews and presuppositions. That there are people who basically believe that Jesus was the figment of, first century uncouth fishermen and other kind of charlatans who were duped by this first century charismatic teacher. There are some others who may take seriously the person and the real presence of Jesus, yet not claim him to be the Son of God. And there are others who claim him to be the Son of God and worthy of worship, but I would tend to think that such persons in religious studies departments or divinity schools will be in a decisive minority rather than majority. And also in terms of the present dimensions, many parents, I think, are worried about sending them to secular universities. As some of you may remember the song by one of my favorite bands of all time, REM, Losing My Religion. Some of them may be afraid that by sending my son or daughter to a secular school up north, they're going to lose all their Southern sensibilities and all the kind of etiquette, and especially about the good old religion of loving Jesus and loving neighbor. And I think to a certain extent that has happened and that does happen, but at the same time, the reverse can very much happen and do very much happen. As I said to you earlier, I became a Christian as a junior at Yale. I certainly had no intention of becoming a Christian, but it really was while at university that I became a Christian. To be fair, it wasn't because of what my professors have taught me, quite the contrary, but it is nonetheless the case that it happened while in college, and the nurturing took place within the university context through my fellow Christian brothers and sisters who are at Yale as undergrads or graduate students, and these things did happen, and do happen still. So I think one of the things that I have to be very careful is to not give away my own kind of cultural, political views everywhere I go and speak. I think I want to be very careful, not cagey, but careful about how I present my perspective. But I think I want to start with this statement. I hope that you can take it as a serious and truthful statement, that all truth is God's truth. Whether it is taught by Albert Camus or John Calvin, whether it is propounded by someone who is an atheist yet talking about philosophy of Thomas Hobbes, or taught by someone who loves Jesus and teaching about biology. All truth is God's truth. And as such, as a Reformed Presbyterian myself, I've subscribed to the real presence and the very real presence of common grace. Not saving grace, but common grace. That means, among others, that operation of God's grace that reaches all humankind in terms of encouraging and empowering all humans to seek after truth, although some will not end up finding the truth, yet God is the one who is beyond all our enterprises and endeavors to know truth and seek beauty and embody goodness. So all human learning and endeavors to ameliorate the human condition and further help human flourishing, as far as that goes, Christians ought to be involved. And in that regard, since modern day universities are, they have evolved a lot. They have transformed themselves a lot. They're in some ways kind of like a corporation. I don't know, some of you might already know, but universities and colleges issue bonds and they get bond ratings. I didn't know that, but my own university, Vanderbilt University, issues bonds and they have a bond rating, something I learned as a member of the faculty senate about 8-9 years ago. So it is not just a kind of antiquated or just the ivory tower buildings and just in that cloistered context you pursue learning of humanities, and it's not just that anymore. They're involved in a cutting edge research in terms of artificial intelligence. They're involved in a cutting edge research of how to translate this old text, old classical text. They're involved in a cutting edge research involving the cure for cancer, or for more germanely, for the cure of vaccine against COVID-19. So that's what modern day universities are. There are smaller schools that are more about kind of a liberal arts education. That means studying the greats of the past to tackle with the questions of today. Regardless of how that question is sliced, it is important to recognize that in terms of understanding God's common grace, all human learning and endeavors that are designed to really further human flourishing, as far as that goes, Christians ought to be involved. So, there are plenty of medical researchers and practitioners that I know right here at Vanderbilt who are Christians on fire for Jesus. Now, they don't talk about loving Jesus every time they see a patient or every time they present a learning lecture at different schools or at Vanderbilt, and yet their ultimate devotion and ultimate direction of their life's being and endeavor are directed toward Christ. So I think that's an important thing to remember. I think it is really important to remember these competing and colliding worldviews and presuppositions. Many of my colleagues operate with the worldview or this fundamental assumption that God does not exist, whereas some others operate out of their commitment to and conviction of the existence of God, and that God still has something to do with modern day universities, and that is also my own perspective as well. So, and also the students I've taught in these three places, Cambridge, Gordon Conwell, and Vanderbilt, many of them are on fire for the Lord. And especially at the first and the third, Cambridge and Vanderbilt, as they are secular universities, many of these students have purposely found themselves there to be the salt and light of the world. And I think in many ways, that's been a very laudable attempt. Some of my friends that I know have said things like, well, it's a God-forsaken place now, isn't it? These liberal universities and colleges. I want to be careful about that. What exactly do we mean by God-forsaken? What exactly do we mean by liberal places or cesspools? Has Jesus left the secular universities because of its uber liberalism? I want to remind us, me and you, of the story of Elijah, as he was really beleaguered by and besieged by the prophets of Baal. The Lord speaks to Elijah, right? Because Elijah's Jeremiah was what? He says to God, Lord, I've been faithful and I've been faithful to your cause, and everyone has deserted you and I alone am left. And God's answer is not so. There are thousands who have not bowed their knees to the prophet Baal. And so it's important for us to remember that just as there was that Elijah in the past, but Elijah was surrounded by, although unbeknownst to Elijah, so many others who hadn't bowed their knees to the prophet, the prophets of Baal, or this foreign god, Baal. There's a very interesting book that I want to talk about briefly. It's by this Canadian sociologist, by the name of Neil Gross, Gross. His book, the title says it all. Why are professors liberal and why do conservatives care, with a question mark. Harvard University Press, 2013. That really was a very important book. In that, basically, he says that when you actually look at the number of professors, even at these elite universities, it is not decisively a progressive, although the overall trajectory and overall majority of the faculty members, as I can tell from my own experience, tend to be more progressive, but that also will depend a lot on which unit or which segment or which department of the university we are talking about. Neil Gross's perspective is very interesting. He says conservatives care about this because they are convinced that if you win, in order to win the sort of quote unquote culture wars of today, you need to capture these Ivy League schools or institutions of higher learning for the cause of Jesus Christ. And when you do that, then we will have triumphed and the conservative cause will win out. And Neil Gross has a big question as to whether that is the case and whether that will in fact be what will happen down the road. So, let me speak very frankly here. I think I would have done so much more candidly if I were actually addressing you all in person, but just staring at my iPhone makes it a little bit artificial or more challenging. But allow me to speak candidly here now. You know what? There are so many of my colleagues who do not share my worldview, Christian worldview. That means that God exists. God is a creator and sustainer and consummator of all things, seen and unseen. And don't share my own perspectives on a number of issues, right? Then, if they don't share my fundamental viewpoint about, beginning and the middle and the end of the cosmic existence, then it's really hard to get them to agree with my views on life and sexuality and religion and the issues of good and beauty and truth. So I do think that sometimes we want our secular colleagues to get on the board, get on to our side of things regarding a lot of these political battle issues, whether it is about abortion on demand or immigration or human sexuality and other things that are actually a lot more divisive. And I wonder whether winning those small battles is the way to really capture the human heart for the cause of the gospel. I have some real questions about that. In fact, conservative Christianity and conservative politics kind of have colluded together. That meant that universities have become the hotbed of cultural wars. And I do lament that, although I do agree with the fact that sometimes our truth claims will come into collision courses and reasonable discussions and discourses must happen. But as I have studied the past, so for example, back in the day, the centuries that I study, 16th and 17th century, especially in mid-17th century England, Baptists were conservative minority and the progressive minority, and Episcopalians were conservative majority. And guess who were more repressive at that time? They were the conservative Episcopalians. Now, in modern conversations and in modern context in America, many Episcopalians, not Anglicans, would be on the progressive things and the perspectives, whether religion or politics. And the Baptists, let's say for our argument's sake, Southern Baptists, would tend to be more theologically and politically conservative and thus find themselves more numerically on the majority. So I think depending on which century and which decade even we're talking about, the whole notions of conservatism and liberalism do not always line up. So I think we want to be careful about what we mean by conservative and what we mean by progressive and so on and so forth. There's another part that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, and that is this book by James Davison Hunter, who's also a sociologist at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. He's written this very important book, which may be familiar to some of you. It's entitled To Change the World. To Change the World, the Irony, Tragedy, and Possibility of Christianity in the Late Modern World. So, this is one of the books that I've read in the past decade that has really profoundly shaped the way that I think about Christian identity here in North America, particularly in the United States of America. Some of my former colleagues and even present colleagues think that, the kingdom of God will come here in America if we elect the right person into the White House, or if we elect the right person into the Senate or, House of Representatives. In doing so, and only in doing so, will we ensure the sort of a kingdom of God and the triumph of the kingdom of God. I'm not sure. The subtitle of this book has the irony and tragedy. There's a certain kind of ironic tragedy about that kind of thinking. Are we sure that by electing the right person to the White House or to the political offices, that the kingdom of God will come? Was that the way that Jesus taught? I am not sure that I agree with that entirely. I do think that what is important, as James Hunter has reminded us in his book, To Change the World, it is that faithful presence. Faithful presence. So I want to kind of talk a little bit autobiographically at this point about my own journey at Vanderbilt University for the last 14 years. Vanderbilt has been a very good place for me. It has brought a whole new set of conversation partners that I did not have while teaching at an evangelical seminary at Gordon Conwell. They hired me knowing that I was an evangelical Christian. They know that I'm an evangelical Christian serving at Christ Presbyterian Church as a scholar in residence. I've sought to do my best as a research scholar, as well as a teacher, as well as a faithful citizen of the university, having had the privilege of living with first-year students on the Ingram Commons for 7 years, as well as serving the University Faculty Senate as its chair for 1 year, and also having been involved in various capacities and roles within the Divinity School. I think what has been the leading motif of my journey at Vanderbilt University has been that faithful presence. I don't think evangelicals will ever be the majority among the faculty at the university. At the same time, what is really encouraging for me as I journey on, going into my 15th year now at Vanderbilt, is this, that there are so many faithful Christian students involving themselves with Voices of Praise, which is African American Student Fellowship, or RUF, Reformed University Fellowship, or InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, or Crew or Navigators. And there are literally hundreds of students during their midweek service and Bible studies that are studying the Word of God as the truth of all truth claims. That really encourages me a lot. And also, having been part of events such as the Veritas Forums that have been held at Vanderbilt, and I've also been able to participate at Pomona College many years ago, has been really also encouraging that there are faithful Christian presences within the university and beyond who are encouraging themselves and others to really take seriously the claim of Jesus as the way and the truth and the life. Furthermore, there have been one of the things that has really encouraged me in the recent past at Vanderbilt has been this faculty Bible study and prayer meetings. That Bible study happens weekly and prayer meeting happens weekly with faculty members who are endowed chairs and deans and associate deans and tenured faculty as well as tenure track faculty, and just getting together weekly to pray for each other, pray for the students, pray for the university, and praying and studying the Word of God. I do think that the ultimate purpose of many of my colleagues who are political scientists or engineers or bioengineers and so on and so forth, historians, and African American studies, is that we desire, in law school, that we desire that the truth and the beauty and the goodness of God in Jesus Christ will shine through our life. Not necessarily that we'll be leading Bible studies in the middle of classes, but that we, through our faithful presence, will prompt others to wonder, why is it that they are like that? And I do think that that's a very, very important issue and question for all of us to ponder. So the final part is about the future. Where shall I send my child in terms of college? Well, I tell you what, I talked to my wife, my much better half, and one of my best teachers ever, I talk to her about this a lot, whether we should send our son to a Christian college or a secular university, secular college. We are currently leaning towards sending him to a non-Christian secular university, provided that they have a very good local church, vibrant Christian fellowship on campus, because unless you start your life in a Christian bubble and end in a Christian bubble, which is, again, an entirely possible and even laudable option of life, but Jesus has taught us to be the salt and light of the world, salt of the earth and light of the world, and to not hide our light in a bushel. So I do think that is important as we try to nurture our son, who's a rising sophomore in high school, to think about the purposes and presence of God in the most hostile environments even. It is entirely true that some professors might mock Christians for believing that Jesus is the Lord and Savior. And when you're writing history papers, you cannot invoke the person of God as a way of validating and verifying your truth claims. We also have to be very adroit and well-equipped in terms of learning about the rules and regulations of the secular academy. When you're learning about biology, when you're in a scientific endeavor, you're not necessarily invoking God as a Deus ex machina, someone who will come out of the machine to prove all things his way. That's not the way that chemistry has been set up in terms of as a scholarly discipline. Even in history, I believe that the ultimate giver and the meaning giver and the creator of all histories is God himself. However, the discipline of history as it is done today does not allow for the sort of a divine interventionist model as an explanatory matrix. So I think knowing the rules and regulations of the academy would help. And I think ultimately it is your prayerful and judicious decision to, and along with that of your children, to decide as to whether a Christian college is the right fit for you or secular university is the right fit for you. Right there at the University of South Carolina, I'm sure there are many, many thoughtful Christian faculty members and many more Christian students who are there, who are really kind of recipients of a lot of blessing that come First Pres Columbia. And I hope that is the same here in the city of Nashville, as I know is the case in the city of Palo Alto, California, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, or New Haven, Connecticut, Durham, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee. You go on and on and on, Cambridge, England, Oxford, England, and so on and so forth. So friends, it's been a great delight for me to engage with you in this question of what is Jesus doing today in universities? So as a way of summarizing what we have talked about so far, I'll say that what Jesus is doing is no different from what he was doing in the founding of Oxford University or University of Salamanca or Bologna. That Jesus, God is the giver and the producer of all truth. Since we're created in the image of God, what we are doing is in our thinking, we are imaging God. We, in our labor to come up with the better ideas and better solutions to the perennial problems, we're imaging God. We're actually partnering with God. Many of my secular friends do not believe in God, would find that idea that I'm talking about absolutely bonkers, barking mad, or absolutely nonsensical, idiotic even, insane perhaps. But what is true is that if I believe that God is behind all human endeavors, then our effort to come up with the solutions for vaccines and cancers and HIV virus and AIDS and so on, I think that same God is at work in our writings of better poetry and in our studies of human institutions such as politics or judiciary systems or hospitals or educational entities. These things are endeavors under the aegis of God's common grace. So I am called to be partnering with anyone who is desirous of learning more about the history of Christianity, whether it is a Christian or secular Jew or atheist or Muslim who wants to study it. But studying it together will result in a better understanding of self, Savior, and society. So friends, it's been a great delight, indeed a privilege, to address this very important topic with you. I am humbled and honored that you would ask me to do so, and I know that not everything I said would be palatable or pleasant to your ears. If I have said something in error, grievous error, do forgive me. And may the God of all truth and all beauty and all goodness lead us to himself in the power of the Holy Spirit. So thank you and blessings, and stay safe and stay healthy in these days of global pandemic. Hopefully, and Lord willing, there'll come a time for me to address you in person. Until then, Shalom.